Welcome once again. I greet you all from the light. Hopefully, you all are having a blessed day, blessed life. And if you're not, perhaps this extensive Bible study can help explain the Bible a little bit better, give you new perspective. Last time, we left off at Genesis 17. We are reading out of the New International Version, and we are going to be discussing Genesis 18, the three visitors. The previous study covered the covenant of God and circumcision. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to just check that out first and several chapters beforehand, because jumping into random chapters in the Bible isn't advised. It really does require quite a lot of context for the build-up. With that in mind, let's begin, and we're going to talk about the three visitors in Genesis 18. So, verse 1, the Lord appeared to Abram near the great trees of Mamre, and while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Verse 2, Abram looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Now, the context for this and what we're going to be focusing on right now is why would there be three? Again, the Lord can work in any method that he chooses. Obviously, he could have sent an angel to appear before Abraham. That's truly the question, right? So why did he send three? Why are there three men? This is obviously a symbol from God, a sign from God, somebody he sent, perhaps prophets, right? So you have to look at this stuff and realize this. And the location and the time, it was in the heat of the day. So some people who would be very speculative of this would say, maybe he was having a heat stroke. Maybe he was overheating when he saw these men. And this is what he thought was happening. But obviously he knew that these guys were either angels or prophets or sent by God. So you need to look at that stuff, and that's the important thing that's happening here. Verse 3, he said, quote, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by." Verse 4, "Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed and go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." And they answered, "Very well, do as you say." So, Abraham wants to not be found wanting, not to let these visitors, these representatives of God, pass him by, but instead he wants to treat them as they should be treated, revered, right? So, if you're in the desert and you're traveling, this is something that would be pretty common. It would be pretty commonplace that you would happen upon a location, you would get refreshed, food, water, bread, and get out of the desert heat, right? So he is noting that if I have found favor in your eyes, you won't just leave here. So what he's saying is that they could have left and gone anywhere, but instead they've chosen to sup with Abraham. They've chose to sit with Abraham for a moment, and that is the important takeaway here, because he obviously is a servant of God. He knows that he's a servant of God. He's already had the covenant made with the good Lord, and this is just going to continue to reinforce the notion that he is the Lord's servant. So we're going to jump down to 6. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 sehas of our finest flour, knead it, and bake some bread." Which again, just stopping there, sehas are something similar to like pieces of flour, approximations in weight. So you would use that like in regard to baking during that period of time, which is 36 pounds. It's a lot, but that is what sehas mean. That's the context that you need there. And he noted that it was the finest flour, so he doesn't want the bottom of the barrel. Needed to make some bread. 36 pounds is a lot. That's a lot of flour, man. If you've ever carried like a 10-pound sack of flour, it's a lot. So we're going to continue on. Verse 7, then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried and prepared it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set them before them. While they ate, he stood near under a tree. So, this is interesting because you have to understand that to sacrifice something like a calf is a pretty serious affair. That's quite a large amount of meat. Just think to yourself, how long would you be able to survive being supplemented by an entire calf, right? An entire cow. Like 3 months, 6 months, you might have worth of meat. That's a lot of meat. And to just sacrifice that instantly, it's a massive thing. The rest isn't particularly necessary to be noted, but it should be noted how much he is giving to these individuals that he has literally just met. So he truly does believe they are sent from God. Verse 9, where is your wife Sarah? They asked him. Again, at this point in time, I don't believe it was stated that he called for Sarah. It's not written down that he called for Sarah. So this could be a reinforced notion that they just knew his wife was Sarah. Continuing to put in the idea that they are representatives of God and they know why they are here. So again, where is your wife Sarah? They asked him. There in the tent, he said. The one of them said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself, as she thought, after I am worn out, and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? And it's just noting that the childbearing age has passed. At this point in time, I believe they're around 100 years, but we will find that out later on. But you have to imagine that even even in the time when you could live 1,000 years, if you were 100 years old, what would that be like, having a child when you're 100 years old? Good Lord only knows. I personally wouldn't know. I have no clue how people were living at the age of 100 back during these writings and being able to move around in such a way. So that's very interesting note, very important to note that they are going to have kids at that very, very old age. Verse 13, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Verse 15, Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. So again, you cannot hide from God. You cannot note and say, no, I didn't do that. You're crazy. But this was 100% a representative of God, a prophet, the Lord himself. We don't know. We don't have that many details. But they definitely knew, and they were sent by God if they weren't God. So the more important takeaway from this chapter here is Abraham pleading for Sodom, and that's coming up next. Verse 16, when the men got up to leave, they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. So the Lord will bring about Abraham as he has promised. There's not much to dissect here. There's not much to talk about here. But the point of this is that God is reaffirming his promise that he gave to Abraham several times before in the previous chapter, and again beforehand when Abram was dealing with a little bit of war and rescuing people. So there you are. Verse 20, then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great. Their sin is so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Now this is unique and interesting because I don't think that the Lord actually needed to go see and what the sin was going to happen. I think the Lord had to test the free will of man. When God says, I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me, he is noting that not only is there a great outcry from the sin, a lot of people likely being hurt, wounded, in various things. You have to remember Sodom and Gomorrah is very well known for their sexual sins, which would be rape and sodomy. So you have to imagine that the cries and screams of agony may be reaching the Lord's ears. But the Lord does know and the Lord does see what occurs. So what I think is he was going down to test to see if this was the truth, if they were going to, even when he was there, try and attempt to sin against him. Verse 22, the men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all earth do right? Verse 26, the Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Now, I want to state right now, a lot of people confuse this verse, and they say that Abraham is the one who goes down to the city and then returns to God and tries to find the 50 people. But this is not true. This is not the way the Bible is written in this version. This version states that the Lord himself went down to find the people, and that it is very, very important to take note of that. As you see, when it continues down, this is a very well-known verse, several verses, a collection in the chapter of Genesis here, where an individual attempts to find righteous people, and it starts at a really huge amount and then falls to a very, very small amount, and they can't even find the very small amount. So it continues on to state, if I find 45 there, he said, I will not destroy it. Once again he spoke unto him, what if 40 are found there? He said, for the sake of 40 I will not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if there are only 30 that could be found there? He answered, I will not do it if I find 30. Abraham said, now that I have been so bold to speak to the Lord, what if 20 could be found there? He said, for the sake of 20 I will not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but I speak just once more. What if 10 can be found there? He answered, for the sake of 10 I will not destroy it. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Now, we know how the story goes, and we will be addressing that in the next chapter. But it is important to note that the good Lord stated that he wouldn't destroy a great city like Sodom and Gomorrah if he could just find 10 righteous people in the city, which is insane to think. Let's just imagine if God went down to Las Vegas and said, if I could just find 10 righteous people, I won't destroy this place. And yet, he would fail to find 10 righteous people, right? So, that's kind of like something that you could relate it to understand what is about to happen, what is going on. And in the next chapter, we will find out if the Lord did indeed find 10 righteous people. It should be focused upon here that Abraham is literally talking to the Lord as it is described within these verses. And every time he addresses the Lord, he does so with fear, reverence, and respect, stating that he doesn't want to annoy him, right? Like, don't be angry with me. Please, just let me speak. Please let me just try one more. Because Abraham already knows what he's going to find in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he already knows what's going to happen. But he is trying to bargain for all of these individuals' lives. And yeah, so quite an interesting chapter. I hope you guys did enjoy this dissection. As always, we can close out with the push in the notion that you could accept Christ today. You could be forgiven of all of your sins. No sin is too great, no matter what you think it is. The good Lord has set aside Christ's life to pay for our sins. So accept Christ today, become a new person, and be happy with yourself. So hopefully you guys will join me back here again for another lesson. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.